The world we know today is far from the world that existed before the flood. What if I told you there are hidden truths in the Bible, truths that have been shrouded in mystery for centuries? What if the story of Noah's Ark, the flood, and the giants we read about isn't just a tale for children, but a deep, spiritual war between heaven and earth, where corruption and rebellion reigned? Before the flood, there was a world unlike anything we can imagine today. Giants roamed the earth, celestial beings walked among men, and the very fabric of creation was being torn apart by a battle unseen. But why did this happen? Why did God allow such destruction? Was the flood really just a punishment, or was it something more, a divine rescue from a world teetering on the edge of complete moral decay? In this video, we're diving deep into the forbidden biblical story of the pre-flood world, uncovering the rebellion of the angels, the corruption of humanity, and the truth behind the Nephilim, those mighty men of renown. We'll explore why angels descended from heaven, why they took human wives, and how they corrupted the human lineage, creating a distorted world that could no longer reflect God's glory. You'll discover why this ancient story is not just about punishment, but about mercy, about a God who waited patiently, hoping for repentance. We will unravel the mystery of the fallen angels and their influence on humanity, the knowledge they imparted, the wars they ignited, and the secrets they tried to hide from mankind will all be revealed. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why the world was destroyed by the flood, and how Noah, a man of righteousness, stood as the last beacon of hope. The flood wasn't just a tragic event. It was the start of something new, a new covenant between God and man. But how does this ancient story relate to our world today? Are we repeating the mistakes of the past, unknowingly? If you're ready to uncover the forbidden truth and understand the full story of what happened before the flood, stay with us until the end. And as always, if this message touches your heart, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, like this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep insights like this. Before the flood, the world was a place of great mystery, a realm where the boundaries between the celestial and the earthly were thin. Heaven and earth were not separate, but intertwined in ways beyond our understanding. And in this environment, where divine presence still lingered, there was also the seed of rebellion and corruption, growing silently but steadily. The angels who had been sent to serve the Creator, to minister to His glory, had fallen, abandoning their station in heaven. What caused this great revolt, and how did it affect the world? How did the actions of these angels change the course of history and the fate of humanity? The Bible tells us that the rebellion began long before human beings were created. Lucifer, a being of light, exalted himself, desiring to be equal with God. He looked upon the glory of heaven and thought, "Why should I serve when I can reign?" His pride led to a cosmic insurrection, where a third of the angels followed him, falling from grace. This act of rebellion was not merely a spiritual defection, it marked the beginning of a war that would spread to earth itself. As the book of Revelation describes, the dragon, symbolizing Satan, drew with him a third of the stars of heaven. These angels, once pure and filled with glory, chose to abandon their calling. They wanted to corrupt what had been made good. They sought to twist the divine order that had existed since the beginning of time. This fall, though tragic, was not isolated. These fallen angels were not content with their rebellion against heaven alone. Their new mission was to infect the very creation they had once admired. They descended to earth, bringing with them a new agenda, one that would leave a permanent scar on humanity. Their influence on the world was profound. It is said in the Bible that the sons of God, understood to be these celestial beings, saw the daughters of men and took them as wives. This union, An unnatural crossing of the divine and the human resulted in the Nephilim, the giants who walked the earth. These beings were not merely mighty in stature, but also carried the corruption of their celestial fathers within them. They were living embodiments of spiritual decay. The Nephilim's presence caused an upheaval in the natural order. Their strength and power gave rise to a reign of terror. Cities were built, but they were founded on fear and control, rather than unity and peace. The wisdom imparted to humanity by the fallen angels, knowledge that was never meant to be known, was used to manipulate, to control, to destroy. The teachings they brought were not merely about science or art, but about war, sorcery, and the manipulation of the natural world. Humans, in their vulnerability, were seduced by this forbidden knowledge. They began to view themselves as gods, as rulers of creation, rather than stewards of it. This corruption was not just spiritual, but also physical. Nature itself seemed to suffer. The harmony that had once existed between humanity and the earth was broken. Animals, once living in peace with man, became wild and predatory. The very land, once blessed and abundant, now bore the curse of sin. The earth itself groaned, reacting to the fall of man and the corruption of creation. The trees no longer bore fruit as they once had, and the soil became hard and unyielding. What had once been fertile ground now required toil and sweat. It is here, in this time of spiritual and physical decay, that we find the story of Noah. Amidst a world consumed by violence, corruption, and the false knowledge of the fallen angels, Noah stood as a beacon of hope. He was a man who walked with God, a phrase that speaks volumes about his character. Unlike those around him, who had given themselves over to the teachings of the Nephilim and the fallen angels, Noah remained faithful. He did not bow to the pressures of the world. His life was not marked by the desire for power or the pursuit of knowledge that corrupted humanity. Instead, Noah sought to live in obedience to God, to honor the Creator in a world that had long since turned away. But why did Noah stand out? Why was he the one chosen to carry on the legacy of humanity, to preserve the hope of redemption in a world that had fallen so far? The answer lies in the purity of his heart. Noah was not perfect. He was human, just like the rest of us, but his heart was inclined toward God. He was a man who listened when others would not. While society around him embraced darkness, Noah embraced light. He did not seek fame or glory, but only to live righteously, and in doing so, he found favor with God. The story of Noah is a powerful reminder of the importance of standing firm in the midst of a world that seems to be falling apart. Noah's life teaches us that even in the darkest times, when it feels like the forces of evil are overwhelming, there is still a place for righteousness. When everything around us seems corrupt, when the world is being torn apart by forces beyond our control, we can still choose to live according to God's will. Like Noah, we can walk with God. And though the world may mock us, though the storms may rise, we can trust that God will provide a way out, a refuge, a place of safety. But Noah's story is also a warning. Just as the world before the flood was corrupted by the fallen angels, so too can our world become corrupted if we are not careful. The seeds of corruption that were planted in the pre-flood world have not disappeared. They are still at work in our society today. The pursuit of forbidden knowledge, the desire for power, the rejection of God's authority, these are all present in our world. Just as the Nephilim sought to corrupt humanity from within, so too can the evil forces of this world seek to corrupt us. We must remain vigilant, just as Noah did. We must choose to walk in righteousness, even when the world around us chooses the path of destruction. So, as we reflect on the world before the flood, let us ask ourselves, are we walking with God? Are we standing firm in the face of a world that is losing its way? Like Noah, we have a choice. We can choose to walk in the light, to live with integrity, to honor God in all that we do. And if we do, we can trust that, like Noah, we too will find grace in the eyes of the Lord. The flood was not just a tragedy. It was a turning point in the history of humanity. It was a moment when God's judgment met his mercy. And in that moment, God preserved a remnant, a seed of hope for the future. We too are called to be that remnant, to stand as lights in a dark world, to choose righteousness in the face of corruption. And just as Noah's faithfulness led to the salvation of his family, so too can our faithfulness lead to the salvation of those around us. As we move forward, let us remember the lessons of the pre-flood world. Let us be cautious of the knowledge we seek, of the powers we chase, and of the paths we walk. And above all, let us walk with God, trusting that He will guide us through whatever storms may come. In the pre-flood world, the influence of the fallen angels went far beyond mere spiritual corruption. It seeped into every corner of human existence, warping not only human hearts, but also the very fabric of society. These celestial beings, once exalted and filled with divine purpose, had left their rightful place in heaven, descending to earth with a new and destructive mission. They saw the beauty of God's creation, saw the potential of humanity, and decided to distort it. Their choice was not only one of rebellion against God, but also one of manipulation. They were not content with merely existing outside God's will. They sought to directly alter the course of history. The Nephilim, born from the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men, were the physical manifestation of this corruption. These giants, towering and mighty, carried within them the seed of rebellion, the twisted mix of the divine and the human. They were not simply legendary figures. They were a direct assault on God's creation. The Nephilim were seen as mighty men of renown, but their power was not a blessing, it was a curse. They dominated the earth, instilling fear in the hearts of men. They became symbols of violence, strength, and terror, their very existence a reminder of the world's descent into chaos. In many ways, the Nephilim represented the pinnacle of humanity's fall from grace. They were revered and feared, treated like gods by the cultures that surrounded them. The wisdom, knowledge, and power passed on to humanity by the fallen angels were not used to build, but to destroy. These teachings perverted everything they touched. Music, once a gift from God, to express beauty and worship, was twisted into a means of manipulation. Weapons, which were intended for protection, were forged for conquest. Knowledge that should have been used for healing was turned into tools for domination. Humanity, intoxicated by the power of the fallen angels and the Nephilim, began to view themselves not as stewards of creation, but as masters of it. The world became a place where the strong trampled the weak, where might made right, and where righteousness was a forgotten ideal. The impact of the Nephilim and the fallen angels went far beyond just the physical world. The very spirit of humanity had been corrupted. People no longer sought communion with God, but instead turned to idolatry, violence, and greed. They worshipped these mighty beings, these Nephilim, as gods, believing that power and dominance were the ultimate goals of life. They replaced the Creator with the creation, the eternal with the temporary, the righteous with the corrupt. This shift in perspective led to the unraveling of society itself. Families were broken, marriages were perverted, and communities turned against one another. The world that God had created in perfect harmony was now a place of chaos and destruction, a reflection of the corruption that had taken root in the hearts of men. In the midst of all this, there was still hope. There was still a remnant, a lineage of people who had not fallen prey to the corruption that surrounded them. This remnant was not a large group, but a faithful one. Noah, a man of righteousness, stood as a beacon of light in a world consumed by darkness. His life was a testament to the power of obedience, to the strength that comes from walking with God even when the rest of the world chooses to walk away. Noah was not without flaws, but his heart was inclined toward God. He was a man who listened, a man who obeyed, and because of this, he became the link between God's judgment and God's mercy. The story of Noah is a powerful reminder that, even in the darkest of times, there is still room for redemption. It shows us that even when the world around us is falling apart, we can still choose to stand firm in our faith. Noah did not build the ark because it was easy. He built it because God had commanded him to. And in doing so, he was a witness to the rest of humanity of the way out, the way to salvation. His obedience became a declaration that, even in a world filled with rebellion, there is still a way back to God. But Noah's story also serves as a warning. It warns us about the consequences of turning away from God. The flood was not merely a punishment for the wickedness of humanity, it was also an act of mercy. God, in his justice, had to judge the world for its corruption, but in his mercy he made a way for those who would listen. He gave Noah the chance to build the ark, to prepare, to save his family, and in doing so, preserve the promise of redemption for future generations. The flood was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. It was a fresh start, a new opportunity for humanity to walk in the light, to choose obedience, and to restore the relationship with God that had been broken. This is a lesson we can take with us today. The world around us may seem dark and filled with corruption, but we, like Noah, have the choice to walk with God. We can choose to live according to his ways, even when the world tells us to do otherwise. The flood, though it was a time of judgment, also set the stage for the salvation of humanity. In the same way, we too can choose to walk in the light of God's truth and righteousness, no matter how dark the world around us may become. As we reflect on the story of Noah and the Nephilim, we must ask ourselves, are we building our own ark, so to speak? Are we preparing ourselves and our families for the storms that may come? Are we standing firm in our faith, walking with God, and remaining faithful to his word, even when the world is turning away from him? The choice is ours. Just as Noah was given a chance to obey, we too are given the opportunity to make the right choice, to walk in righteousness, and to preserve the hope of redemption for ourselves and those around us. The fallen angels and the Nephilim left their mark on humanity, but they did not destroy the promise of God. Noah's faithfulness, even in the face of overwhelming darkness, shows us that God will always provide a way for those who are faithful. His mercy is greater than any corruption, and his grace is stronger than any darkness. If we choose to walk with him, we too will find favor in his eyes, just as Noah did. Let this story be a reminder that even in the darkest times, God's light still shines. Even in the face of corruption and rebellion, his righteousness will prevail. And though the storm may rage, we can find refuge in his arms, just as Noah found refuge in the ark. God is faithful, and his promises endure. Let us choose to walk with him, just as Noah did, and trust that, no matter how dark the world may seem, God will always provide a way out for his faithful. As humanity spiraled further into chaos, there was a silent but powerful undercurrent of divine patience waiting for a moment of repentance, a flicker of hope. This period, so marked by rebellion and darkness, offers not only a vivid portrayal of divine justice, but also a profound lesson about the nature of God's mercy. Amid the relentless tide of sin and corruption, God's sorrowful gaze turned to the earth. It was not cold wrath that moved his heart, but a deep, painful love, an eternal sorrow that saw his creation rejecting the goodness he had intended for it. But even in this darkness, there was still grace. Noah, amidst the wickedness of his generation, found favor in God's eyes. The story of Noah speaks volumes about divine mercy. It wasn't just that Noah was a righteous man, it was that he chose to walk with God when the world around him had long turned its back. Noah's life shows us that God's mercy is not blind or passive. It actively seeks to rescue, to restore, and to redeem even when all seems lost. Noah did not only escape judgment by building an ark, he became a vessel for salvation. His life of obedience, his steadfast faith, became a beacon of hope in a world drowning in despair. This shows us that even when we feel surrounded by the forces of darkness, choosing to walk with God and remain faithful can still lead to redemption. Noah's act of building the ark is also an example of God's perfect timing. God could have chosen to send judgment immediately, yet he patiently waited for Noah to build the ark, to prepare for the salvation of what remained of his creation. This act of patience wasn't about a delay in judgment, but about God's willingness to give humanity a chance, a final opportunity to heed his warnings. It is a reminder to us today that, though we may experience delays in answers to our prayers, or in seeing the fulfillment of God's promises, it is not because God is indifferent. It is because he is waiting for us to act, to build, to prepare, to make the necessary steps toward restoration. When the flood finally came, it was not a random disaster. It was a divine intervention, a reset for humanity. This was not an act of capricious anger, but one of ultimate restoration. God could have simply wiped away creation and left no trace of humanity or animal life. But he chose to save Noah and his family, along with representatives of all living creatures. This decision speaks volumes about God's nature. His justice is never detached from his love. Judgment and mercy are intertwined, and even in his righteous anger, he desires to preserve what can still be redeemed. This powerful truth invites us to reflect. Are we actively living in preparation for the moments God calls us to? Are we building our own arks in the form of obedience, righteousness, and faith? Or are we ignoring his voice, assuming that the storm will never come? This divine patience and mercy echo through the pages of history, reminding us that God's plans unfold according to his perfect wisdom. The flood was not just a cleansing of the earth, it was a divine act of hope. It demonstrated God's ultimate desire to preserve life, to restore his creation to its intended purpose. As Noah stepped out of the ark onto the newly cleansed earth, he wasn't just witnessing the end of a tragic chapter. He was standing at the beginning of a new opportunity, a chance for humanity to restart, to rebuild, and to walk in relationship with God once again. However, this opportunity wasn't without its challenges. Despite the floodwaters receding, Noah and his descendants still carried the seeds of sin within them. The earth, though cleansed, had not been entirely healed. The human heart, though spared, was still inclined toward rebellion. But even in the aftermath, God did not leave Noah and his family without hope. He made a covenant with them, a promise that he would never again destroy the earth with water. This covenant was a symbol of God's unbreakable commitment to his creation, even when it falls short of his glory. The rainbow that appeared after the flood became a symbol of that promise, a reminder that God's mercy would always follow his judgment. God's covenant with Noah is a powerful demonstration of grace. Despite humanity's failings, God chose to initiate a new covenant, a fresh start for his creation. This new beginning was not a free pass to sin, but an opportunity for humanity to walk in obedience and relationship with God. The rainbow, though a symbol of promise, was also a reminder that God's justice still stands. It is through the cross of Christ that the judgment of God and the mercy of God meet in the most powerful display of love the world has ever seen. Just as Noah's faithfulness led to the salvation of his family, so too does the obedience of Christ lead to salvation for all who believe. The lesson of Noah and the flood speaks directly to us today. We live in a world that, much like the pre-flood world, is filled with corruption and rebellion. The forces of darkness, both spiritual and earthly, continue to encroach upon the human heart, seeking to twist and distort God's creation. Yet even in this time of darkness, we are called to live in the light, just as Noah did. Like Noah, we are called to prepare, to build, to stand firm in our faith, and to walk with God. The ark was not just a boat, it was a place of safety, a symbol of God's provision. In the same way, Christ is our ark. Through him, we are saved from the flood of sin and death that threatens to overtake us. Just as Noah had to actively build the ark, we too must actively place our faith in Christ and build our lives on the foundation of his word. Noah's story is not just a historical event, it is a parable for our lives. It speaks to the importance of choosing obedience even when the world is filled with opposition. It reminds us that God's judgment is always tempered by his mercy and that he desires to restore, not destroy. It challenges us to prepare for the storms of life, to build our faith and our lives on a solid foundation, and to trust in God's promises even when we don't understand the fullness of his plan. Just as Noah's obedience to God saved his family and preserved creation, so too can our obedience to God preserve not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. The story of Noah's ark, of the flood, and of the covenant is a story of grace. It is a reminder that, no matter how far we fall, God is always ready to offer us a way back. His mercy is never exhausted, his love never fails. We are called to stand firm, to walk in his ways, and to trust that, even when the world is dark and the floodwaters rise, God will always make a way for his people. Just as Noah and his family found refuge in the ark, we too can find refuge in the arms of God. The flood may have been a moment of judgment, but it was also a moment of grace. And just as the rainbow marked the promise of God's faithfulness, we can trust that God's promises for us remain true today and always. This promise is not just a symbol of hope for the future, it is a call to action in the present. The ark is still being built. The doors are still open, and the invitation is still being extended. Let us walk with God, as Noah did, and build our lives on the foundation of his love and mercy. Just as the flood was not the end of the story, neither is the corruption of our world the final word. There is still hope, still redemption, still a way to walk in the light of God's truth. Let us embrace that hope and live with the knowledge that, no matter what storms may come, we are safe in God's embrace. In a world filled with uncertainty and turmoil, there is one thing that remains constant: the unwavering love and grace of God. The story of the flood, of Noah's Ark, is not just a tale from ancient history. It's a living testimony of God's justice and mercy, his relentless pursuit of restoring his creation, and his eternal desire for a relationship with each one of us. When the world turned its back on him, when corruption filled every corner of the earth, God didn't just abandon his people. No, he provided a way out. He gave them a chance for redemption, a chance to start again, and that chance was through Noah's obedience, his faith, and the ark that became a symbol of God's salvation. As we reflect on this powerful story, we are reminded that just like Noah, we too are called to walk in faith, to stand firm in obedience, even when the world around us is crumbling. The flood wasn't just about judgment. It was about grace, about God's mercy that is greater than any darkness, greater than any rebellion. Just as the waters washed away the corruption of the old world, God's grace cleanses us today, offering us new beginnings, second chances, and eternal hope. In the midst of the storm, Noah chose to trust God, to listen to his voice, and to build the ark. It wasn't an easy task. It wasn't a quick fix. It was a long, challenging journey. But Noah's faithfulness preserved life. And that's the same call we hear today. In a world where darkness tries to overwhelm us, we too are called to build our faith, build our lives on God's promises, and build communities of love, kindness, and light. The story of Noah and the ark is not just ancient history, it's a blueprint for how we are to live today. And just as the ark became a place of refuge for Noah and his family, so too can Christ be our refuge today. Through him, we are saved from the flood of sin and despair. Through him, we find peace in the midst of chaos, hope in the face of uncertainty, and grace when we feel most undeserving. Christ is the ark that carries us safely through life's storms, and just as Noah was saved, we too are saved by his sacrifice, his love, and his mercy. But as we reflect on these truths, it's important to ask ourselves, are we truly walking with God? Are we building our lives on his word, on his promises, or are we drifting, unaware of the storm that's coming? The flood wasn't just a warning, it was a call to action. God didn't wait until the last moment to save Noah. He provided a way, and Noah's obedience was the key to his salvation. In the same way, God has provided a way for us today through Jesus Christ. Will we, like Noah, listen, obey, and trust? Now, as we come to the end of this journey, I want to leave you with this thought. Even in the darkest times, when it feels like all hope is lost, there is always a way forward. God's mercy is greater than our mistakes, his grace is greater than our failures, and his love is greater than any darkness we may face. Just as the floodwaters receded and the rainbow appeared as a sign of God's promise, so too will his promise of salvation stand firm for us today. No matter how far we fall, God's love will always bring us back. If this message has touched your heart, if you feel the light of God's love shining through these words, I encourage you to share it. Let others know about the grace and mercy that awaits them, just as it awaited Noah. And if you find yourself moved by this message, please take a moment to support this channel to help me continue spreading the good news of God's love. Every like, every comment, every share is a powerful reminder that we are not alone in this journey. Together, we can spread his love, his hope, and his light to a world that so desperately needs it. Your support, no matter how small, means the world to me. If this video has brought a sense of peace to your soul, if it has helped you find a spark of hope, then I invite you to keep this light shining. Let us walk together as Noah did, in faith, in obedience, and in the knowledge that God is always with us, guiding us, and calling us to build something beautiful in his name. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being part of this journey. May the light of God's love shine brightly in your life, today and always.